with me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the Draft Prospects 101 series, your guide to some of the biggest and hottest names of the 2022 NFL Draft. We're talking quarterbacks. And here's another guy that you throw into the mix, this smorgasbord, if you will, of quarterbacks in this draft class that doesn't really overwhelm you with physical gifts or talents, but another guy that you throw in that mix of quarterbacks that we'll hear his name called more likely than not on day 2, possibly as early as day number 1. I'm talking about a guy that won a ton at Cincinnati, had his best season statistically of his career in 2021 and led his team to an undefeated season and the first non-Power 5 conference team to make it to the postseason. Of course, I'm talking about Cincinnati quarterback Desmond Ridder. Let's take a look at Ridder and what he does well, how he factors into this quarterback mix, and who he reminds me of as a player as we near the 2022 NFL Draft. Let's take a look at Desmond Ridder. And this is a guy 6'4", 215, so he gives you a little bit more size than what we are accustomed to seeing with these quarterbacks in this year's draft class. Not a lot of size when we're talking about the QB prospects in this year's upcoming draft class, but he's one of the few guys that does offer you a little bit of size. He's a guy that, as you can see, redshirt senior, plenty of experience. We'll get into that in a second. There's a lot of things to like about Desmond Ridder. The problem is I don't think there's a lot to love about Desmond Ridder. Let's go inside the numbers to talk about why Desmond Ridder will attract some interest and maybe even make a team fall in love potentially as high as the first round. Let's take a look as we go inside the numbers. So when you look at Desmond Ridder, the first thing that has to jump off the screen at you is the amount of career starts. He's right there with Kenny Pickett, another one of these guys, a 4-year starter, tons of experience, and you can't purchase experience. There's no substitute for it. When a guy has that much experience, you feel really good about the player that you're getting a lot of times. And then the numbers right next to it, I think they're even more astonishing. And when you start getting into that territory, you're talking about some of the best win percentage in college football history for a starting quarterback. 43-6 overall record for Desmond Ridder during his time at Cincinnati. An astounding number, big time win percentage there, outstanding. In the last 2 seasons, he combined for 22 victories and only 2 losses. So he was outstanding the last 2 years, led Cincinnati to an undefeated regular season this year before losing in the playoffs to Alabama. Last year, they went 9-0 before losing to Georgia in one of the New Year's Eve 6 bowl games. So, and that was a game that they dominated early and allowed Georgia to creep back in and win on the last minute field goal. So Ridder has been proven to be able to take his team to victory, and that's something that you can appreciate as we look at his passing statistics. Nothing's going to really jump off the screen at you, and this is going to be a theme with Desmond Ridder as we go through this breakdown. But as you look, in 2018, he came right onto the scene essentially as a redshirt freshman, got his feet wet, and never really looked back. 62% completion percentage for a freshman is pretty damn good. You look at the 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He really acclimated himself well. Kind of struggled in 2019. You see the completion percentage goes way down, takes a massive dip. That's what you're expecting to see from the freshman season, not from the sophomore campaign. The passing yards go down. Look at the yards per attempt, the lowest of his career. And the touchdown to interception ratio was also the worst of his career. So 19, not a great year for Desmond Ridder, but he bounced back in 2020, really showed why a lot of people thought if he had come out last year, he would have been a guy that might have ended up in the first round, probably more so the second round. With the class that came out last year, probably would have been a second round pick, and it was best that he go back to school. However, you see the completion percentage go up to his best of his career, and it would remain that. You see the passing yards kind of stay right around where they've been. The yards per attempt, though, goes way up to over 8 per attempt. And then the touchdowns kind of hovering right around where they've been, 20 the first year, 18 the second year, and then 19, 6 INTs. So that number goes back down, and you're looking more at a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, which is solid. You'd like it to be better than that, but that's solid. A far cry from the 2-to-1 that he was at the year previous. And then You go to 2021, this is where he kind of opened some eyes. I think people were on the Desmond Ridder train, but if you were really looking for him to take that next step, he kind of did that in 2021. Now, I will say in 2020, the rushing statistics, the amount of touchdowns he accounted for, they were much greater. But in terms of rushing and passing touchdowns combined, but when you look at or actually not much greater, the touchdowns he accounted for in 2021, he had 6 rushing touchdowns in 2021 and 30 passing touchdowns, so that's 36 total. Meanwhile, in 20, he had 19 passing touchdowns, but 12 on the ground, which was a career high for him. But anyway, you look and you see everything across the board kind of sticking status quo. The thing that really jumps up at you, well, 2 items actually. The yards, by far and away his greatest yards of his career passing wise, up over 3,300 yards passing. He had never even eclipsed 2,500 yards previous to 2021. And in the 30 touchdown passes, I mean, that bested his mark by 10 touchdowns. So that was an outstanding season, kept the interception totals low. So, he's almost at a 4-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. So you saw the numbers really start to go up and a greater understanding of the offense, and a guy that you saw starting to take those leaps and bounds that you were looking for as he heads to the pro game. I think he's another one of these guys that you have to take a look at the rushing statistics, because he's such a good athlete that the ability to use his legs is a part of his package. And so we go into his rushing statistics as we continue inside the numbers, and really nothing really that great here, except for in 2020, that touchdown number is huge. That 12 touchdown season, and he's capable of that. That's not, a one-off or an aberration. As you can see, pretty consistent rushing touchdowns, 5, 12 was the outlier, and then 6. But he's capable of having an 8 touchdown rushing season. So he's a guy that can use his legs. He's a dual threat in the red zone, as Malik Willis is, as Matt Corral has shown the ability to be. Kenny Pickett can use his legs, but he's not as effective a runner as some of these other guys, including Desmond Ridder. So the fumbles early on in his career were a problem. As you can see, 10 of them in his freshman year, lost 7 of them. One thing I can say about him, when he fumbles, a lot of times they don't get it back. As you can see, 10 fumbles, lost 7 of them in his freshman year. In his sophomore campaign, fumbled 7 times, lost 3 of them. Another 7 fumbles in 2020, lost 4 of those. And then the numbers came way down in 2020. So he took better care of the football. Only 3 fumbles, but he lost all 3 of them. So he's a guy that a lot of times when he fumbles, they don't get the football back. But nothing egregious here. When you look at his rushing totals and you see some consistency rushing the football. One thing I will say, in his final season, he was a little bit less reluctant to, or he was a little bit less likely to run. He was a little bit more reluctant to run the football, and really didn't need to as much because he was doing a lot of the damage with his arm. But as you can see, his lowest rushing total of his career came in his best season of his career, coincidentally enough. So that's something to keep an eye on. But he still had 6 rushing touchdowns despite the rushing yards coming down by over 200 in his final season for the Bearcats. As we get to the pros that I think some teams may convince themselves to fall in love with, and there are a lot of traits here that you like with Desmond Ridder, but again, I don't think there's anything that you necessarily love. Let's get to his pros and why this guy will be drafted in the first 2 rounds of the upcoming draft. The first thing is his size. Again, I've already talked about this. Don't want to spend too much time on it. He's 6'4", 215 with the ability to probably put on another, 5 to 10 pounds. And he doesn't have to. Quarterbacks, you want to put yourself in a position to be able to withstand the rigors of the NFL game and getting hit. So I could see him putting on another 5 pounds of muscle or something and getting to 220 and having that be his playing weight for the remainder of his career. But his size, 6'4", you can't teach that. Either you have it or you don't. And he can see over the line. And I think his size is a big pro. Adequate arm talent. He's not the biggest armed quarterback in this draft class, but he can throw it. He can put the football anywhere it needs to go. Similar to Kenny Pickett, who doesn't have a massive arm. He can get the football wherever it needs to go. Same here with Desmond Ridder. I don't think that's an issue, and I don't think he's a guy that has to worry about his arm being a hindrance to success for him at the next level. Athleticism. That's I've talked about it already. His legs are a huge part of his package and what he brings to the table, and you can see it in the red zone, especially when they go read option. He decides to pull it, and that zone read is deadly when you've got a guy with the skill set of a Desmond Ridder. So he does have some athleticism, not on the levels of a Malik Willis or even a Matt Corral, but I think Desmond Ridder's legs are part of what he brings to the table. Extremely accurate when his feet are set. Something that I noticed watching him on tape is when his feet are set and he's dialed in, he's pinpoint accurate with the football. But a lot of times when his feet aren't set under him, when he's trying to make off-platform throws, that's when the ball tends to sail or it hangs up in the air a little bit longer than it needs to, and it gives the defender a chance. He's inaccurate. I don't love him throwing the football on the run consistently. There are times where he'll throw a frozen rope on the move, but then there are times where he's just inaccurate when his feet are not set. And I think he's a guy that really wants his feet to be planted firmly on the ground when he goes to deliver the football. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in the NFL, as we all know, you're going to have to make a lot of throws off of different platforms. And a lot of times you're not going to be standing with a firm base. And so I think when he does have a firm base, when he is allowed to stand tall in the pocket, he can get the football wherever it needs to go. Throws with touch. And I think this is something that we don't talk about enough because there are a lot of guys that simply lack the ability to put the football where it needs to be with touch. There are a lot of guys that want to throw everything 99 miles an hour, and sometimes you need that changeup. You need the 87-mile-an-hour changeup with a little bit of air underneath. And he has the ability to do that. And that's when you see that show up, a lot of times it's with layered throws down the field, whether it's short, intermediate. You see it in those layered throws where you got to get it over a defender, but you still want to have it drop right into the box, into the bucket, so to speak. He's capable of doing that. Plays with poise and under control. I think this is probably one of my favorite attributes about Desmond Ridder is that it never seems like he's rattled. It never seems like the moment or the stage is too big for him. And he never seems to be out of sorts, if you will. The entire team can be crumbling around him. The environment can be raucous. And he doesn't seem rattled. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't rattle his cage. You can't force him into mistakes because obviously you can force him into mistakes and into turnovers and things of that nature. But even when he turns it over, he doesn't seem like a guy that gets down on himself. He knows, okay, I get another opportunity. I'm going to go out there and atone for the mistake that I just made. He just always seems, even when a play goes awry and a poor snap, he's a guy that's going to pick that snap up and try to make something happen. And if nothing's there, he's not going to take a bad play and make it worse. He's one of those guys that he's comfortable with ending every possession with a kick. You know what I mean? And so if they got the right defensive call for the offensive play call that they're trying to run, and they got us on this one, he's not going to do something stupid and force it into double coverage. If he's out of the pocket, he's not going to run out of bounds and take an 8-yard loss, and he's not going to allow someone to sack him 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage when he's right next to the sidelines. He's going to throw the football out of bounds. He's just always poised and under control. If he knows he can't get away from the rush, he'll just fall down. Like, he's not going to give you an opportunity to take a bad play and make it worse. Manages the game well. You know what that usually comes with. You know the title and the moniker that comes with a guy that manages the game well. I think that's a part of being an NFL quarterback, however. And Desmond Ridder, to me, manages the game well. That's part of the reason he's 43-6 in his collegiate career, because he understands the game situation, what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and that's what winners do. And that's what Desmond Ridder has been in his career, and I think he does a really good job of managing games well. Maturity. You know, this isn't something that I talk about very often because it doesn't have anything to do with on-the-field production, but you know, scouts and GMs and owners, they love guys with maturity that come in with their head on their shoulders, especially at the quarterback position. It's the most important position in all of football, and I'd argue in all of sports, in team sports, that is. And so you want a guy that gets it, and he's got a kid already, and it may have multiple kids. I think he's got one for sure. And at this point, you know, he they love guys that are somewhat family men. You know, they've done that, been there, done that, and they're ready to settle down and really lock in on what's important. And he's one of those guys that comes with that, coming from his background and already having, you know, a girlfriend and having a baby. And so I think he is in a position where, you know, it's about family and it's about football. And I think, you know, there's this level of comfortable there's a level of comfort that comes with a guy that has the maturity that a Desmond Ridder is coming into the league with. Experience. Here's a guy that I don't have to explain this, and I'm not going to explain it very thoroughly. This is a guy that has 50 games that he's played in, 49 career starts. I don't really need to say much more than that. The experience is off the charts here, and it's something that you don't get generally with collegiate quarterbacks. They usually stay 2 or 3 years as starters, and that's it. So you get a guy that started for 4 years, played in college football for 5. You're getting an experienced, mature football player that this last pro kind of sums it up. He's a winner. You know, won 43 of his 49 starts. I mean, that's an insane number, but Desmond Ridder took care of business, led his team to the playoffs, the first non-Power 5 conference school to play in the playoffs. And it's just a testament to what he's been for that program. And so we go from his pros to his cons. And so the first thing that I think is the biggest thing is that there's no overwhelming physical trait nor attribute that separates him from, you know, the average NFL quarterback. I mean, when you look at Desmond Ridder, for me, I just see a guy that can do everything well, but nothing great. There's not one redeeming quality that stands out above the rest of his redeeming qualities. Okay, he's a good athlete. He's not a great athlete. He's got a good arm. It's not a great arm. You know, he can make plays, but he's not a playmaker, a true playmaker. You know, there isn't anything here that you can sink your teeth into. All right, you can win a lot of football games with a guy like Desmond Ridder, but can he beat a Josh Allen? Can he outduel a Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow? Can he go toe-to-toe with a Patrick Mahomes? I don't think so, okay? I just don't think you win against the elite with a guy like Desmond Ridder. He can get you there. He can win you 11, 12 games, but he can't win in those situations. He's not beating Lamar Jackson one-on-one, you know. And again, quarterbacks don't play against one another, but we saw a playoff game where literally the two quarterbacks took over the game and the one that had the ball last won, okay? Desmond Ridder isn't winning you a game like that. He's not winning you a game like that. Limited upside, and that takes me to the next one. Limited upside. I think Desmond Ridder, he can get a little bit better. I'm not saying you're getting the product as is as he steps into the league, but there isn't a lot more upside here. You pretty much know what you're getting from Desmond Ridder as a football player. I think he's again really solid in a bunch of areas, but doesn't really stand out. And look, this isn't the end all be all what I'm about to say to you, but I think it is a little bit of a glance into the window of what he's going to be at the next level. So in his 49 starts, and there are a lot of contributing factors. I know, trust me. I am not oblivious to the fact that there's talent and there's play calling and offensive efficiency and the mentality of your head coach. And these are all things that go into it. But still, in 49 career starts, Desmond Ridder only has 6 300-yard passing games. No 400, no 500-yard passing games, just 6 300-yard passing games in 49 career starts. Just to give you a little bit of framework and a platform from which to compare, guys that are his contemporaries, guys that are in this draft class with him, okay? Kenny Pickett, excuse me. 10 games of over 300 yards just in 2021 alone, okay? And there were probably 1 or 2 400 and 500-yard games in there as well. Even a guy like Malik Willis, who we don't think is the most prolific passer, he had 4 of them in the last 2 years, okay? So if you extrapolate that over 2 more years as a starter, Who's to say that Malik Willis doesn't have 4, 5, or 6 more? Okay. And then Matt Corral has 11 career. Remember, Matt Corral is really essentially a 2-year starter. So in 2020, he had 8 alone. Okay. And there were a couple that were 400 and 500-yard performances again. And then he had another 3 in 2021. So again, when you look at it and compare it to the other guys in this draft class, Ridder just, he's average, you know, and again, this isn't the end all be all. Okay. And the offenses are different. The weapons that he's throwing to are different. The play calling is different. The aggressiveness of his head coach, Luke Fickell, is different. I get all of that. I'm not dense, okay? I understand that there are extenuating circumstances still. When you're a stud, you supersede any of that stuff, and you make it happen anyway. And that's just not who Desmond Ridder is. I think there's a limited upside here. Deep ball often left short. You know, I'm a big deep ball guy because it's so hard in the NFL to consistently go on 11, 12, 13 play drives and end with touchdowns. So when you get an opportunity to cut a corner, which a deep ball is essentially an opportunity to take a shortcut. When you get an opportunity to take a shortcut, you cannot miss if that guy has a step or two. And quite often you're watching Desmond Ridder throw the football down the field to his receivers. His guy's got a couple of steps and he's got to wait on the football. Is either getting knocked away. And there's a great example of it. And this wasn't quite a deep ball, but it's an opportunity for Desmond Ridder to put Georgia away in that bowl game in 2020 to cap off an undefeated season. The defender doesn't even turn around. He doesn't know where the football is. He's just running like a bat, like a banshee, screaming out of hell, throws his hands up at the last second, and the ball hits him in the back. And it's incomplete. If Ridder puts some air under that thing, either that guy's going to run into that defender or that receiver, or it's going to be caught down the field and that game is over. The receiver could have done a better job of running into that defender, trying to go back to the football, and they would have gotten a flag. But that's no here nor there. You know, you watch him in the Notre Dame game, he takes a shot down the field. His guy has beaten that Notre Dame defender by a step and a half, maybe even 2. And that Notre Dame defender is able to get his hands on the football. Why? Because that ball was severely underthrown. And you see that consistently from Desmond Ridder, even on some of the passes that are completed where his guys, Pierce has got to go climb the ladder and go get the football. It's because that ball isn't necessarily thrown where he can just run under it. He's got to go and high point it so that the defender doesn't get to it first. So I just think he often leaves a lot to be desired on his deep ball. And again, I think that's something that he needs to clean up because if he wants to be successful at the next level, that's the thing he's going to have to do. And then finally, average against upper echelon opponents. So to me, he's played in 3 games in his career against upper echelon opponents, you know, big time programs. And he's 1-2, and he'll always have that road victory versus Notre Dame on his resume. Hostile environment against a Notre Dame team at the time that was undefeated. And he goes into South Bend, leads his team to an impressive victory. They pretty much dominated Notre Dame in that game after a sluggish start. And he was really good in that game, but he wasn't great. He was solid. He managed it well. All the things that I've said about him, he was solid. He managed it well. But he didn't blow your socks off, and he didn't do that in any of the games against the big 3 that he had on his schedule throughout his career, and that's Notre Dame, Georgia, and Alabama. In those games, he was 1-2. Again, the big win against Notre Dame being the only one that he got. Could have easily have beaten Georgia. Never had a chance against Alabama. 59% completion percentage. On average against those 3 teams when you put it all together. He averaged 215 yards passing against those 3 teams. And to me, this is the microcosm of what I think he is as a quarterback. 4 touchdowns, no interceptions against those teams. That's not bad, right? But it's not difference making. You're not putting your team in a position to win the football game. Yep, you're not turning it over. You're not hurting your team. But they need a heroic effort because you're playing against a team that's just flat out better than you. So you got to take your game to the next level to then raise the game of those around you. That's not Desmond Ridder. Okay, you put talent around him and he can succeed, but he's not raising the level of play of anybody around him. So that takes me to my comp. And to me, this comp is just as easy as the Malik Willis comp for me. This is a no-brainer. I think this one might be an even more apt comp than the Malik Willis to Jalen Hurts comp. And it's Ryan Tannehill. I mean, they're splitting images of one another. You can win a lot of football games with Desmond Ridder. If you ask me right now, which quarterback was poised enough to come in his rookie season and lead a team to either the postseason or to a winning record, but just falling short of the postseason, I'd tell you it's Desmond Ridder. If Desmond Ridder ended up on the Pittsburgh Steelers and had to start right away with that defense and Najee Harris and some of the weapons they have around him, Pat Fryermuth and all those receivers, Desmond Ridder would come in there, manage the hell out of the football game, win 9, 10, 11 games, and put the Steelers in a position in the postseason. The problem is when they play against the Chiefs, like the Steelers did this year in the playoffs, or they play against Joe Burrow, or they play against Justin Herbert, or they play against Josh Allen, they're going to get run out of the building because he can't elevate his game to a level that's going to allow him to outduel or at least play even with one of those quarterbacks. That's what Ryan Tannehill is. Ryan Tannehill will win you a bunch of football games. He'll manage the hell out of the football game. You put a run game around him. The biggest difference between these two quarterbacks right now is that Ryan Tannehill throws one hell of a deep ball and Desmond Ridder does not. When Tannehill gets an opportunity down the field, a lot of times he does not miss. If Desmond Ridder can develop that, I think he's got a long career in this league as a solid starting quarterback. But again, he's not going to move the needle. And that's how I feel about Ryan Tannehill. Solid NFL quarterback. You'll never win a Super Bowl with him. He'll win you a bunch of regular season games. Similar to Alex Smith, you will never win a Super Bowl with a Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. Sorry, not sorry. That's how I feel about Desmond Ridder. Let me know what you think. Leave it down in the comment section. How do you feel about Desmond Ridder? What is your comp for him? How do you feel about him at the next level? And where would you draft him? For me, he's a second-round pick. I would take Desmond Ridder in the second round. You're getting a quality NFL backup immediately, and I think eventually he's a mid to low-level NFL starter. And there's nothing wrong with that. You take that guy in the second round. So I think Desmond Ridder isn't a first-round pick, and I don't think he's going in the first round this year, but I do think Desmond Ridder will be a guy that is highly sought after in the second round of the 2022 NFL Draft. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Draft Prospects 101. We'll be back with another quarterback breakdown. And looking forward to getting through the rest of these QBs and then moving on to other positions in the draft. You guys, have a good one. If you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button for more great content. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. And also, hit the like button as it helps this channel grow exponentially. Until next time, you guys, have a good one.
Louie.